It really is hard to believe, isn't it, that today marks 25 years since Britain lost its people's princess. Princess of Wales had been holidaying with Dodi Fayed in the Mediterranean before staying at the Ritz Hotel in Paris. And of course, while the couple were being pursued by paparazzi, the car they were travelling in crashed in the Pont de l'Alma tunnel. She died in hospital a few hours later on the 31st of August 1997. And this is how the world heard the news.
We interrupt this film to tell you we are getting reports that Diana, Princess of Wales, has been badly injured in a car crash in France.
This is a news flash from National 9 News.
Welcome to this special National 9 News update, and the news out of Paris on the condition of Princess Diana is not good.
Just been handed from the Reuters news service what is marked bulletin.
A French minister is being quoted this by the Reuters news agency now, that Diana, Princess of Wales, has died.
Diana is dead. She died at 4 o'clock this morning.
This is BBC Television from London. Diana, Princess of Wales, has died after a car crash in Paris.
Confirmation from Buckingham Palace tonight that the world has lost Princess Diana.
Well, Diana's brother, Charles Spencer, led today's tributes, posting this photograph of a flag at half-mast at their Northamptonshire home. Meanwhile, in London, crowds gathered outside Kensington Palace, paying their respects with cards and banners and flowers, just as they had done a quarter of a century ago. Well, of course, all of us over a certain age can remember where we were. But, Paul, for you, this was obviously a lot more than for most of us. This was deeply personal.
It was, and 25 years ago, I can hardly believe it's 25 years, my life changed completely, inside out and upside down. I didn't realise it at the time, but as I flew to Paris and I stayed with the princess in the room that she was in and held her hand, I didn't realise that the rest of the world knew about it. I thought it was my special moment, taking care of someone I cared about very much.
Like time had stood still for you in that moment.
It did. And since then, of course, I've been through traumatic situations in my life, and I've sort of always looked towards that inspiration that I knew was still there, because she was so iconic and so incredible and such a beautiful spirit. I still look towards that, even today.
It was such a moment, I mean, obviously for the royal family, but for the whole country and arguably for the world, when everybody started seeing this outpouring of grief. And for being on the inside for the royal family, did you realise how the momentum was going to build?
I didn't. And I didn't realise until the night before the funeral. I asked if the princess could come back to Kensington Palace, the home which she'd lived in for most of her adult life. And I sat with her all night in a vigil, talked to her all night. The room was filled with flowers, and I could hear people outside. It was a warm night, and people outside were praying and singing. And I realised then that in the morning, when the light came, I'd have to give her back, because for that night she was mine. And I gave her back to the world as she left the front door of Kensington Palace and turned the corner on the carriage. And then the crowds really did pay their respect to her. I could hear the wailing and the mourning coming from all those people. It was quite incredible. That moment, the world stood still, just for one slight second. What is that? It can only be magic.
I think it was magic and shock, don't you? It was, like, Richard, it was that moment where people couldn't believe what they were hearing.
Oh, completely, utter shock. I mean, it's the first time I've seen those headlines, actually, for so long. It sent a cold, chilly shiver completely up the spine. It was such a huge shock. I remember exactly just looking at that image of the dates that you were born and that you've passed away, and you can't quite believe, no, not possible. Not possible. Utter shock.
The actual news reports have dated, haven't they?
Yes.
But she hasn't. She's sort of transcended that, and she's become the princess we always loved, and she'll always be there.
I guess,
and the people love her.
That's part of the magic, the extraordinary image she had around the world. I mean, she was a global giant, and there are very, very few of those in our lifetime.
Isabel, I was saying, I mean, I'm 50, so this was exactly half my lifetime ago, and yet it's like one of those cliches when people say, you know, where were you when you heard about JFK? Everybody, as I said, over a certain age can remember where they were and can remember that sense of shock.
Yeah, I mean, I do remember I was just waking up on a summer morning at my parents' home in Scotland, and we actually didn't have a television. You know, my parents brought me up with no TV, bit of a disadvantage for someone who came to be a kind of tabloid reporter. So we had to get our news from the radio, and also newspapers, which were even bigger then, you know, and they all brought out their special editions because this accident had happened at a very awkward time for the print media, and they all brought out extra editions of the paper. And then I was a very new reporter at that time. There was that huge debate after that about the behaviour of the media and the paparazzi in particular. And I was very interested in that because I was a young reporter, and that had potentially profound implications for the way we operated, particularly those of us in the tabloids.
I mean, like Isabel said, it was one of those stories where, you know, it came with the advent of 24-hour news. I think it was one of the first stories where I stayed up all night to watch. You know, I'd come in, I'd been at a party with my brother, and we'd come in and we'd seen that this had happened, and we stayed up all night, we saw the announcement. And my mother was such a huge fan of the royal family, and Princess Diana in particular. And I remember my brother and I being very worried about how she was going to take the news, so much so that we woke up my dad, who didn't believe us, so that he could tell my mother. And like you said about the wailing, that's what I heard from my mum, who was completely in mourning for about a week or more. And it was just so shocking. And, you know, talking to my mum about it afterwards, the affinity that she had with Princess Diana, and I think there's a lot of, I like to call them the immigrant mums, you know, of a certain generation, especially in a lot of these Commonwealth countries. You know, I'm from Ghana, which is obviously a Commonwealth country, have a real affinity for the royal family. I mean, my mother-in-law is named Elizabeth and was born on the day of Ghanaian independence. We love the royal family. We love Princess Diana, so it had a massive effect.
So the other thing I've been reflecting on today is how extraordinary it is that Harry is now a year older than Diana was when she died. I find that really extraordinary. And I've been thinking about, obviously, many people commenting about where are they, why aren't they out commemorating today, you know, and what are they doing, and about, you know, the fact that their relationship seems to be pretty broken at the moment, and how sad that would have made her.
It's an intensely private moment for the boys, and I think they'll be not celebrating, commemorating their mother by speaking to their children and telling them how wonderful Granny Diana was. And I think that will be William and Harry's contribution.
But the fact that they might not be talking to each other, the day that my father died, which was January the 13th, it's one of those dates that my whole family, you know, we never forget it, and we'll always message each other and say, thinking of Dad today. And the thought that they might not be doing that is so totally sad.
It is very sad, and that rift is enormously sad for the people who care about William and Harry. And I still care about both those boys. Watching them grow from tiny babies into fine young men and watching them go out into the world, Diana would be so proud of that. What she wouldn't be proud of is the fact that they're not speaking and they're oceans apart, because she thought they were joined at the hip for the rest of their lives.
And immediately after her death, you know, they've talked subsequently about how much they lent on each other and how much comfort they got from being very, very close and sharing in that pain. And I remember, I think it was last Mother's Day or the recent one, where William and Kate's children were sending Mother's Day cards to, you know, Princess Diana, and Charlotte wrote, and Papa's missing you. So they keep her memory alive, but the fact that the two of them were at loggerheads.
I'd sort of optimistically hope that somehow, hopefully they spoke, but even if they haven't spoken today, that they sent a message to each other. Somehow they shared it, but maybe I'm just too optimistic on that.
I think you're being very romantic in saying that. I think the rift is so deep and
so
goes so far.
It's so tragic if it is truly that deep, because it should be a moment of at least trying to heal some of the rift.
And Paul, do you have any hope that that can be healed, or is it's just too far gone?
I think it's too far gone, personally. I used to think that maybe Kate could bring them back together. She tried.
Yeah.
When they were at Prince Philip's funeral. She tried her best.
Right.
It didn't happen. Harry's quite petulant in lots of ways.
And William is stubborn, is he
And
not?
William is stubborn. So the two boys are at loggerheads. And, of course, at loggerheads with their father, too, for different reasons.
It's interesting looking at the two personalities. As they've got older, it's clear that Harry's really a Spencer in personality. He's got that very Diana tempestuous, the common touch that she's got, the ability to connect with people, but equally much more, sort of...
yes.
Explosive than William being so calm and a bit more like a sort of Windsor.
Yes, but Harry was always the spare.
Yes,
Harry never had a
that's
route
true.
map. He never had that map to tell him where he was going. He had to find it himself. He found that in Meghan.
Yeah.
So Meghan gave him the exit. She gave him the future too.
Yeah.
That common touch was extraordinary. I remember I was 18. I was a barman at an outside catering event. She was the guest of honour, opening a building. Came in, sort of VIP room, and it was just extraordinary. She literally came over to me and spoke to me with all these dignitaries. That was the common touch.
She'd speak to the staff first.
I bet your jaw was on the ground,
On the
Richard.
ground.